A temple member visited me a few weeks ago. I could see from the way she entered my study and sat down, she was exhausted. "How are you?" I asked. She began to cry. "What's going on?" I gently inquired. "My mom," she answered. "She is alone since my father died. She lives just over the bridge in New Jersey. Every night after I feed the kids, I drive out to see her, stay for a few minutes, and come home. She is so happy when I arrive and so sad when I leave. But I've got to get back to put the kids to bed and get them off to school in the morning and then go to work. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. I'm angry at everyone and everything. But I won't abandon my mom." This season often returns me to the wisdom of Martin Buber concerning our relationships. All real living is meeting, Buber taught. Opportunities for deep and profound connection, moments Buber termed I-thou, become possible when two people open themselves to each other. But more than that, we need other people to achieve our fullest selves. I become I, Buber explained, only through my relation to the thou. And yet, Buber cautioned, in healthy relationships, though partners remain fully present for one another and concerned for one another, they are never subsumed by one another. A healthy I maintains its sense of self. In devotion to the needs of others, we should not ignore our own. The Jewish proof text from Pirkei Avot is one we all know. Im ein ani li mili, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Uchsha'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, but if I am only for myself, what am I? Balancing the needs of self and others. That is the annual task and principal goal of these holy days, and for so many of us, the perennial challenge of our lives. Finding that balance fosters satisfaction, happiness, security. Failure to achieve it results in strain, alienation, resentment. We know this to be true from our own experiences as parents and children, siblings and spouses, colleagues and friends who desire personal fulfillment while caring deeply for others. The congregant weeping in my study knew it all too well. "Of course you won't abandon your mother," I answered her. "How could you? But if you wear yourself out and become resentful because of it, that won't help either of you. What if I find someone you can talk to who has gone through this? And what if you take tonight off or tomorrow night? Put down the responsibility you're carrying just briefly and do something to take care of yourself. And next week too, just one night, it won't mean you love her any less." This devoted daughter is not alone in her physical and emotional weariness. Frequently, I meet with congregants caring for aging parents, and with aging parents still tending to the needs of their adult children who feel that strain. Of all the conversations I have, these are among the most painful. But for so many of us, the weight of service to others, whom we would never abandon, does sometimes drain us. Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, an early pioneer of holistic and integrative medicine, observes, "Often we neglect one of the fundamental principles of real service, taught many times a day aboard every airplane in the United States, one we have all heard hundreds of times without recognizing its relevance to us. It is the part just before takeoff when the flight attendant says, If the cabin loses pressure, put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help the person next to you. Service is based on the premise that all life is worthy of our support and commitment, our own lives included. We all have a right to be fulfilled and happy. The Talmud teaches that in the world to come, we will be judged for the desires we never realized, the joys we never seized. But like the woman who came to visit me, we hesitate, not quite believing it is acceptable at times, in fact necessary at times, to care for ourselves and even put ourselves first. So instead, we dismiss our own wants and needs as selfish and unworthy, and hoist upon our shoulders burdens we can't possibly and don't need to bear alone, eroding our spirits. Rabbi Jacob Rudin told of an elderly woman who took the train to visit her son. She had never ridden a train before, and as she boarded, she clung tightly to her suitcase and a gift she had purchased. When the conductor came to collect her ticket, he noticed that despite the empty seat beside her, the woman still carried the valise and the present on her lap. "Ma'am, it's a long ride," he said. "You don't need to hold those yourself. Why don't you put them down next to you and let us carry them for you? When we get to your stop, I'll help you." Kol Nidrei beseeches us, set down your load, just for tonight, the expectations others place upon you and you put upon yourselves, and forgive yourselves your failures that weren't so much failures as your human limitations of time and strength. Be good to yourselves. Tomorrow afternoon's Torah verses include a commandment we all know, the full import of which we probably don't appreciate. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. How we treat ourselves is the standard of measure. So be good to yourselves in this new year. You'll be better to others as a result. And that too is what Yom Kippur asks of us, to be kinder and gentler to others. It starts with knowing them. Buber taught that we interact with the world around us in two ways, through I-it relationships and through I-thou relationships. I-it describes encounters we have with objects we use, like the pew you're sitting on, or with individuals serving in purely functional capacities, like the security guard at passport control. I-it suffices to navigate the world of things, but when we consider people simply for what they do for us, we don't really consider them at all. To know other people for who they truly are and not merely for how they serve us, in Buber's language, for our relationships to grow from I-it to I-thou, requires our willingness to open our hearts to their concerns, their hopes, their fears, in an effort to grasp their lived experience. Knowing other people means understanding how they feel about their lives. Every person brings to every moment a personal narrative shaped by memories, real and imagined, experiences recent and long past. We live surrounded by our stories, Jean-Paul Sartre explained, and we see everything that happens to us through them. Knowing other people means knowing their stories. Rarely do we make the effort to understand others that deeply. Instead, we leap to assumptions about them based on the smallest bits of information, like where they live, what they wear, how they vote, who follows them on Instagram. In his recent book, How to Know a Person, David Brooks laments, We're living in the middle of a vast relational crisis in which political animosities, technological dehumanization, and social breakdown undermine connection, strain friendships, erase intimacy, and foster distrust. People have lost the ability to see and understand one another, producing a culture brutalizing and isolating. Our society's polarization reflects this. So do our own highly curated lives. Our social media feeds send us just the information we want to read from just the people with whom we want to associate. And our understanding of the world narrows and our circle of relationships shrinks as a result. While there's nothing selfish about acknowledging and addressing our own needs, surrounding ourselves with friends who support them, and reading newspapers that reflect our values and inform us on matters of personal interest, problems arise when we fail to recognize that others in our lives also have needs, when we never attempt to comprehend alternative points of view or investigate concerns of people who live in communities different from our own. Pastor Harry Emerson Fosdick once called that having a mirror mind, adding that to pass from a mirror mind to a mind with windows is an essential element in the development of real personality. Only when we see others can we begin to know them. And only then will we realize that we cannot impose on them our own priorities, on friends and family, our own aspirations. How often do spouses grow apart over the failure to communicate evolving visions of their life together? How often do children reduce their parents to providers and caregivers, neglecting to regard them as human beings with their own needs and feelings, good days and bad ones? How often do parents alienate their children by foisting upon them their own ambitions in an unconscious effort to create extensions of themselves instead of self-confident adults with their own goals and talents we, their parents, must sometimes learn to appreciate? One of Martin Buber's students was Chicago's renowned Rabbi Arnold Jacob Wolff. Wolff liked to tell the story of taking his sons, 9 and 11 at the time, to meet his famous teacher in Israel. He arranged for a 30-minute visit and instructed his boys each to come up with a good question to ask the great philosopher. But when they arrived, something unexpected happened. The children noticed Buber's telephone. With buttons instead of a rotary dial, it was unlike any they had seen in America, and they were fascinated by it. So Wolff's entire prized half hour with his hero was spent with the revered theologian showing the boys his phone and explaining how it worked. Wolff was exasperated, and when he and his sons departed, Wolff began to scold them for wasting their visit on something so silly. But then he caught himself. He suddenly realized that Buber had been embodying his very own teaching, meeting people where they are, appreciating them for who they are. When we do that for others, Buber taught, we ourselves are rewarded with I-thou opportunities for deep and profound connection. Do you recall in Genesis chapter 2 how God formed Adam from the dust of the earth, placed him in the Garden of Eden, and gave him all of creation to till and tend and enjoy, except for the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? But then how God decided that it was not right for a human to be alone, that Adam needed a partner, someone the Bible identifies as kenegdo, alike yet different, to stand beside him, to ease his loneliness, but also in opposition to him, to challenge him to learn and grow. And so we are, explains Rabbi Jack Stern, this delicate balance between Adam alone, who is singular, self-sufficient, independent, and individualistic, and Adam, who is lonely, who needs another person, who needs Eve, not only to ease the pain of his loneliness, but to help him, by the very experience of communicating and touching and being with, to become the unique person he was born to be. I become I, Buber maintained, only through my relation to the thou. We need other people to achieve our fullest selves. We were meant to share our lives. For some, the more private among us, and those for whom relationships have brought pain, sharing can be difficult. One of my favorite novels is George Eliot's Silas Marner, set in the early 19th century English countryside. Silas is a self-sufficient but isolated man, bitter over hurts the world has done him. His indignation is his strength, or so he believes. Then one night, an orphaned girl wanders into his hermit's cottage. Tenderness awakening within him, Silas adopts her and raises her. And by virtue of this child, his heart softens and opens up to the community around him. Eliot writes, "In old days, there were angels who came and took men by the hand and led them away from the city of destruction. We see no white-winged angels now, but yet men are led away from threatening destruction. A hand is put into theirs, which leads them forth gently towards a calm and bright land, so that they look no more backward, and the hand may be a little child's." That hand is our opportunity. We don't know when or where it will appear or whose it will be, but we must be ready to see it and take it. Eliot's white-winged angels refer to the biblical tale of Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his rescue from the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. We should not expect that sort of divine intervention. But God does still move in this world through each of us and those around us, if we allow for the possibility. Redemption, Eliot teaches us, lies in relationships. It requires someone else's hand. Many of us are blessed this evening to be surrounded by family and friends, their presence a gift to be treasured. But what of those who say, "My house is empty. Those who once filled it are gone. I am alone"? To them we answer, in this place, no one is alone. Not really. We have each other. How often have I asked one congregant to call another seeking advice through difficulty, or just looking for a friend? We don't all have one, not nearby anyway. One recent survey revealed that Americans today have fewer friends than a generation ago. And a second, that 40% of Americans don't feel a sense of belonging even among those closest to them. All the more alarming because a third study noted that 27% of Americans over 18, 67 million people, are estranged from one or more members of their family. Life can be lonely. We know it. And that is a fundamental reason why this congregation was created, to connect us with other people in an extended family, to help us see ourselves as part of something larger than ourselves, to encourage us to reach out to others, and in so doing, enrich our lives. And the High Holy Days entreat us to repair our fractured relationships while there is still time. If we wait for others to reach out, it may be too late. Hillel's admonition, Im ein ani li mili uchsha'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, concludes, Ve'im lo achshav matai. If not now, when? Rabbi Harold Kushner told a story of a colleague counseling a young woman who suffered a falling out with her parents. They had not spoken for years. The colleague asked her, "If you were to get a phone call today that your parents had died, would you go to their funeral?" The woman reflected for a moment and responded haltingly, "Yes, I guess I would. I suppose I owe them that. They are my parents. And I know that if I didn't go, I would feel guilty the rest of my life. Plus, I would want that sense of closure." The rabbi nodded. "Good answer. So why do you need to wait for a funeral?" The woman cried, realizing that there was a part of her that didn't want to fester with anger at her parents, that wanted to make amends. That evening, she made the phone call. On Yom Kippur, we take an honest measure of who we have become. Our tradition calls this self-encounter tikkun midot. David Brooks, in a previous wonderful book, called it the road to character. And if we are to prosper in the confrontation with ourselves, he writes, we have to draw on something outside ourselves, wage our struggles in conjunction with others waging theirs, just as we are this evening. According to our tradition, Yom Kippur is also the day of the final weigh-in. Our good deeds are placed on one side of the scale and our bad deeds on the other. Our fate, we are taught, hangs in that balance. I don't really believe that, and neither should you. But the image of the scale and a search for equilibrium can guide us, for this is the moment to calibrate the balance between I and thou, concern for ourselves and concern for others. The rabbis also teach that in the heavenly court, Satan serves as our prosecutor. And they tell a story of how prior to our trial, he conferences with his associates to consider the best way to entrap us and prevent our atonement. One devil recommends, "Tell them there is no judge." To which Satan responds, "That may fool some, but most already believe God is their judge." So a second devil advises, "Tell them there are no rights and wrongs and therefore no need to repent." Again, Satan shakes his head. Most people know a sin when they see one. Finally, a third devil smiles. "I have it," he declares. "Tell them there is no hurry. Tell them they have plenty of time." No. This is the time. A new year has arrived. This is the moment to take a long look at that face in the glass. For some, the reflection may have so dimmed, their self-worth so diminished that they must commit right now to rebuilding it, because everyone has a right to fulfillment and happiness. For others, their sense of self may have grown a bit too large, and the time has come to shift from the mirror to the window and see more clearly the others in their lives who also have needs deserving of attention and perspectives worthy of consideration. And for all of us, this is the moment to reach out in trust and in friendship, to mend the relationships we can, to say, "I love you," while there is still time. Im lo achshav matai. If not now, when?